When I started to plan this talk and plan this event, I sort of selected a working title of meditation, healing meditation to go with it, meditative healing. And it sort of stuck because I didn't know what else to call it. Perhaps when we get to the end of this today, you'll be able to tell me what I should have called it and what I'm really talking about, because I don't know. However, I will warn you ahead of time that I do get emotional at times. I ask you to bear with me. I am where you get what you see, you know, so that's it. The second point, or the third point, whatever point we're on, is that I want to thank and dedicate this to my wife, who has given me on all the journeys we're going to describe here today. She's given me unconditional support. And it is true that we have often together stood in the mist, looking around to see where the heck we are. But she has always been there to support me. And being the height that I am, I need support because I can topple over very easily. About 45 years ago, I had a moment in my life where everything changed. The way I thought the world worked changed completely. What I thought was impossible suddenly was possible. And I have spent from that time to this trying to figure out what happened. When I was born, I lived with my mother for 2 months before I was given up for adoption. Now, I don't remember that. Human memory doesn't really kick in until about age 3. But when I turned 30, I decided to look for her. And governments were not cooperative with this type of research back then. And we were told, anybody who looked was told, that there'd been a fire, and all the records had been destroyed, and there was nothing left. Of course, that wasn't true. After looking for and searching for about 5 years, I found one court document. And in that court document was what I believed to be a name, a surname, or maybe part of a surname. So I then decided to forge a letter from my mother to the Grace Hospital, where I believed I had been born. And I was writing to clarify confidential information which I, as my mother, may have supplied at the time of my birth, and try and see if they would reply. The fact is, I don't remember what I wrote in that letter. But I do remember when I got to the bottom of the page, I had a problem. I wanted to sign that letter, and all I had was this fragment of a name. And for the longest time, I sat there and I stared at that blank piece of paper at the bottom, that blank space. And I thought, what am I going to put here? I mean, I had part of a surname, but that's not going to carry the load. It's going to look like a fake. I mean, even if I had an initial, anything to put in this space. I mean, there are 26 letters in the alphabet. I mean, I could take one shot, 1 in 26. Let's narrow the odds. 1 in 26, I could, you know, what would I choose? And I began to have a conversation. Lasted about 10, 15 seconds. It was 23 words long. And in that conversation, she told me her name. Now, that's impossible. And if you think I'm crazy and you want to leave right now, I understand. But I urge you not to. We met about 5, 6 months later. And as we sat one evening in her living room, she said, you know, I think about you from time to time over the years. She said, there was one point says, I was driving from Los Angeles to San Francisco, and I was taking the Golden State Highway, and I was driving along, and I was going to visit her son, my brother. And she says, I started to think about it. And I started to cry. She says, I cried so hard I had to pull in the emergency lanes of the boulevard because I couldn't see the road. I was shaking so hard I couldn't hold on to the wheel. And she stayed there for about a half an hour before she could calm down. I said, that was Palm Sunday. And your time here in California was 4:36 in the afternoon. She thought for a minute. She said, how can you possibly know that? She said, I said, that is the moment you told me your name. Well, for the longest time I thought that maybe I found a wormhole through the time-space continuum. You see that on Star Trek. Or a path through the labyrinth of the psyche. Something. I did not believe it was a miracle. I believed that something had happened, that there was something there, that I wasn't the only person in this world who would ever experience this. And what happened, and how did I explain that? How do I get back there? How do I use that space? And I began reading and listening and research. There's not a lot of information on this sort of thing. And I found finally, in one of my favorite minds of research, in Carl Jung. And Carl Jung's known for collective unconscious, for his dream interpretation, archetypal images, all this. And he wrote a series of lectures published on what he calls synchronicity. And he defined synchronicity as being a coincidence beyond all astronomical odds. And he wanted to figure out and answer the exact question I was looking for. How does this happen? And he went back to during the war when they did mental telepathy studies, and they put a guy in this room and a guy in that room, and he was holding up a card. The guy in this room was supposed to guess what the card was. And then they put the guy upstairs and downstairs. They put him in another city and they do this, and they do it over the telephone and do this. And the conclusion was that there was absolutely no statistical evidence that any of this worked. So he began to look at other options and explored other things. One of them was astrology. And he looked at planet signs, moon signs, when you were born, what time of year it was, and where, you know. And it got into these symbols and signs throughout this chapter, and my mind was going, I couldn't follow it. So I skipped to the end of the chapter where it said conclusions. There's no statistical evidence. So I thought, well, we passed that one. And then he started to do experiments. He wanted to know where in the brain that this phenomenon occurred. So he took several hundred people with different connections and wires and did these EEG studies. Of course, now we have pretty pictures that show all different colors and the rest of it when they do this. But after doing hundreds of these tests, he could not find any indication that the brain was involved in synchronicity. Which led them to wonder, where does this originate? What is synchronicity? And if it doesn't originate in the brain, where does it originate from? So he began to study animals that did not have brains. And they exist. And one example is a jellyfish. You would know about. I mean, jellyfish can feed, they can get their food, they can nourish their bodies, they can defend themselves, they can make more jellyfish, and they can swim around like do jellyfish type of things. They don't have a brain, but they do have a neurological system throughout their body which drives them, and they exist in the jellyfish. And he began to look at plants. And we've all heard of a plant where the fly comes in and he goes into the blossom of the plant secretes a solution, and he closes down and he traps the fly inside the blossom and dissolves the fly and eats it. Mushrooms, the fronds on the bottom of mushrooms. If little tiny bugs go in between those fronds, it irritates the fronds. The fronds will get irritated and they'll expand and they'll trap the insect in there and they secrete a fluid. They dissolve the insect and they eat it. So, reading this sort of thing, you begin to think, and I thought, if I were then to take a drawing of the human spinal system, and I'm going to draw the spinal cord, and I'm going to draw all the little fronds and stuff coming out to the side, the arms, the fingers, the nerves, and the rest of it. And then I'm going to reach down and I'm going to pull a plant out of the ground. I'm going to hold that up against my drawing. And I can compare them. And they look the same. All living things have a neurological system. It goes back in our evolution, before we had brains, that we had a neurological system. All living things. Which makes tree huggers not quite as crazy as maybe we think they were. But the interesting thing is, too, that we use this in everyday language, and we don't even know it. We say to somebody, well, I have this gut feeling. Oh, that just made the hair on the back of my neck stand up on end. I felt chills run up and down my spine. I saw that, it just made my skin crawl. Why have we dismissed these as some expression, when we know intrinsically that there actually is a reaction that we generate when we see these things? I mean, how does a flock of birds fly through the air? And they fly as one. A school of 10,000 fish in the ocean can turn in 1/100 of a second and go a different direction. 10 million butterflies can find a spot on this planet and go there, even though they were never born there. They were born thousands of kilometers away on a milkweed pod. You know, if you go into a room like this and you bring a dog in, the dog can immediately tell who's afraid of him. He immediately knows who's good for a pat on the head. You know? So what's happening? How do we do this? There are two types of problems in life. One is a logical problem, and the other is an emotional problem. And you cannot solve a logical problem with emotion, nor can you solve an emotional problem with logic. If you go out in the morning and your car won't start, it doesn't matter how angry you get, how many times you jump up and down and wave your arms, the car is not going to start. If you have a friend with a broken heart, there is no logical argument that you can make that will heal your friend's broken heart. If you're going to fix your car, you're going to need a toolbox. And you've probably got a wrench, you've got a flashlight, you may have a set of jumper cables. And at some point you're going to need a manual. You're going to have to read the manual. We've all heard that expression. If you're going to help your friend heal a broken heart, in your toolbox, you're going to need empathy, you're not going to need compassion, you're going to need love. The manual is already downloaded. The manual was downloaded before you were even born. You know, a child who is born and doesn't suck properly has a difficulty doesn't have a mental problem. They've got a neurological problem. Gotta catch myself back. A newborn infant knows when he's hungry. He feels hunger. He knows when he's content. He feels content. He knows when he's in pain and uncomfortable. He knows when he's clean. Newborn infant also knows when he's loved. And when he's abandoned. On the day my mother handed me over to the social workers, she held me in her arms and they took a photograph, a picture. She gave me a copy of this. And as she held me close, her heart broke. She gave me an instruction. She said, when you are ready, you come and find me. I will be waiting. I'm only 2 months old. I don't understand English. I can't even figure out whose fingers it are in front of my face. My brain has not learned how to calculate, how to reason, how to do all these things. But a broken heart and abandonment, that's in the manual. We're born with that. We know that. She also told me that throughout her life, she had always known with absolute certainty that one day she would open the door and I would be there. So 30 years later, as I sat staring in that space, the bottom of that page, the connection was already existed. It was already there. All I had to do was answer the phone. Now, that would be synchronicity. A coincidence beyond all astronomical calculations. And Carl Jung had a key to synchronicity. And the first item on that key was intention, which is here. And that's when you put the key into the lock. And the workers on that key are hope and faith. Those are the tools that are used. But there's one other thing that he didn't put in that formula, and I will add to it right now, and that is the courage to turn the key and open the door. How many times have we had good intentions, faith, and hope, never had the courage to turn the key and walk through the door? A few years ago, we had a friend in the family. His name was Dave. Dave went shopping one day. He was in a store. He was walking up the stairs to the second floor. And he had an epileptic seizure as he reached the top stair. Unable to defend himself, he fell straight backwards and hit his head on the cement stairs, 15 of them, all the way to the bottom. He was unconscious in the intensive care unit for 3 weeks. He was in hospital for 4 more months. And then we got a phone call or a meeting. We were told that he was ready for discharge. We've saved his life, and can you please come and make arrangements as to what we're going to do? Now, we've seen Dave almost every day, so it was no surprise.
But we went into this meeting, and there was 15 people. There was doctors, nurses, therapists, social workers. I don't remember who was in that meeting. At that point, Dave was a full body lift. You had to put a net down in the bed, roll him into the net, take a hoist, lift him up, and move him into his wheelchair. He had a feeding tube going in through his stomach, and you would pump feed in a couple of times a day. He was nonverbal except for the occasional yell or scream. We didn't realize that he had broken all the bones in his hearing and his ears, and he was totally 100% deaf. His challenge for each day from the occupational therapist was to see if we could get him to put one block on top of another. And that was the challenge for the day. As we sat in that meeting, my wife and I said, maybe one day, our hope is that Dave will be able to transfer himself in and out of bed safely by himself. And if he can sit at the table and he can feed himself, we'll consider his rehabilitation a success. And it was this long pause. Until finally the doctor spoke up and he said, I'm sorry, he says, but you don't understand. And that ignited a rage within me. I sat there quietly and listened. But the burning fire of that rage started what I now refer to as the 100-day experiment. Now, being of a certain age and male, I have to get up in the night. And when I get back to bed, I don't often go right back to sleep. I lie there and stare at the ceiling for a while. So I decided to make use of that time. I decided to try and find that space in some weird part of this universe where I talked to my mother. I wanted to talk to Dave. And as I lay there, I would hold Dave in my arms, and we would rock back and forth. And I would hold and feel his skin on his arms. I'd run my hands through his coarse hair. He had funny, thick earlobes. I'd caress that. I'd feel the unshaven face against my skin. As I held my arm, I could feel his breath on my arm. And we would rock. And we'd cry. And as the tears flowed, that veil of the reality that embraces this world would tear. And you could reach through that tear and you could touch the void. And I would tell Dave, and we would talk about what we were going to do the next day when I went in. What we'd try and accomplish. We started with simple things. I'm going to put a ball on the table in front of you. And you see if you can stop it from going on the floor. And we would try that. I remember the day I gave him a piece of paper and a pencil to see what he would do with it. And that's when we learned that he could read and write. He wrote on the piece of paper, I said, "Can you write your name?" He read it. And he took the pencil slowly and he wrote Y-E-S. Instead I realized I asked the wrong question. We went on and we started using puzzles, these kids' puzzles where you take 3 or 4 wooden pieces and you put them into different holes and slots. And we graduated from that to a 10-piece jigsaw puzzle where you had the pieces and they put them on just on the table. We started to play X's and O's together. 3 weeks after our discharge at that meeting at the hospital, he had to go back for a follow-up scan. And so at the appointment, I told the lady on the phone, I said, look, he's a full lift, we need a Hoyle lift there, we've got no cognitivity and all the rest of it. Of course, you get to the appointment and nobody's made any notes. Nobody has, all the Hoyle lifts up 3 floors up, you know, there's nobody here, there's nothing there. I'm sorry, all the adoption records have been burned and there's no record of anything, you know. So, anyway, it didn't help. We sat in the room and I looked, and then the girl said, she says, is there any method, any way we can get him onto the scanning table? I looked at Dave. Dave knew what we were trying to do. And I turned the key. And I said, yes, there is. I said, do you have a slide board? He said, yeah. I said, we're going to transfer. 3 weeks after that meeting, Dave did a slide transfer onto that table. And as we started to prepare things for this event, he looks at me and he says, like baby. I wrote and said, no, big boy. I got a thumbs up. When we got back to the residence where he was staying, we immediately moved from sling lift to what they call a pull to stand lift. You put this thing in front of him, he can grab the handles and they put a strap around him and they can lift him up and they can move and they turn him, they put the wheelchair on him and sit him down. And while he was doing that, I decided I was going to build an arm contraption for the side of the bed. And I came in and I started measuring the bed, doing things. He was watching me, he was in the wheelchairs. He sort of knew what I was doing. And when I finally got it completed after several days and got somebody to weld it, because I can't weld with it, darn. Came in and I bolted it onto the bed. And he looked at it. He rolls his wheelchair up. He puts the brakes on the wheelchair. He lifts up his foot pads, puts his feet on the floor. He reaches up and grabs the arm, pulls himself up, turns sideways and lowers himself onto the bed. And that was 5 weeks after that meeting in the hospital. And after that, he began to transfer himself in and out of the bed like he owned the place, like a orangutan. They didn't know where to find him. He could push himself up and down the hallways. You know, his favorite place was in the lounge where he would transfer himself onto the couch and fall asleep watching TV. It was just like old times. But about a week after that first transfer at the hospital, I was with him and I said, it's lunchtime, Dave. I said, they're serving chicken sandwiches. I said, do you want a chicken sandwich or do you want to go for a pizza? Gee, I'll give you a guess what he chose. So, we got our coats on, grab the chair, we go down the hallway, through the security doors, down the elevator, through the lobby, out onto the street, down the street, across the intersection, down the strip mall, and into the pizza shop and order a pizza. And we said, what kind of pizza do you want, Dave? He says, fish. And the guy behind the counter looks at fish. I said, what kind? Fish. I thought for a minute, I thought, anchovies. So we get our pizza, and we go back across the street into the lobby, up the elevator into the dining room. And everybody else has finished their lunch by this time, and the staff are cleaning up. So I go over and I get a couple of plates, knife and fork, napkins, set the table for both of us. Put the pizza in the middle of the table. And as I sit down, I serve him a piece, and I serve myself a piece. And staff witnessed picked up his knife and fork, he cut himself a piece of pizza, and he ate it. Not only that, he went back and cut himself a second piece, and this time he twirled the fork to get all the cheese, and ate that. That's 4 weeks after we'd been told we didn't understand. Dave went on, and we continued to do lots of other things. We'd play wheelchair soccer in the hallway. We would go downstairs to the lounge, and we'd get a coffee, and we could play a game of cards. He could sit at the billiard table, a pool table, and with a rake and rock, and for his wheelchair, he could line up a shot, and he could sink a pool ball, his cue ball, and he could hit and put a ball in the corner pocket full length of the table. None of this was easy. Shoot a cue ball, a billiard ball, might be 5 or 10 minute process. Go through a deck of cards with a simple high-low game, maybe 45 minutes. He'd end up with more food down the front of him on the tablecloth than he ever got in his mouth. But he could do it. He learned to transfer in and out of my wife's car with a little bit of help. We'd go to museums, we'd go to restaurants. We went out to our house for Thanksgiving dinner. We went back to see the doctor at the end of the experiment. The doctor said, "I don't understand." Right.
How many weeks was that?
Most of it took place in the first 100 days. It continued after that.
Did you continue the visualizing of holding him in that whole period of time?
It was for 100 days we continued that.
You did that visualizing?
We did the visualizing, 100 nights, 100 days we go and see him and follow through on it. And in 100 days, just to carry on that same theme, they said, "Stop it." I said, "I'm not going to let you in anymore." And that was Dave. He was stubborn. But I began to wonder, how did this happen? Was this just coincidence? I mean, would this have happened anyway, even if I'd taken a full night's sleep for the last 100 days? So once again, I start to look and say, well, somebody else must have experienced this. Something else must have happened. I can't be the only one who ever did this. And I began looking, and again, it's hard to find stuff on this type of thing. But I came across a practice called Ho'oponopono. I had actually run into it years before and hadn't thought about it for a while. Now, Ho'oponopono was made popular by a doctor by the name of Hu Lin. But actually its roots are in the culture of the Hawaiian people. And they had a belief that if you harbored anger and discontent within yourself, you would become sick, make you ill. And so they would have events, family events, on a regular basis, sort of like a Sunday dinner. And they would go around and people would tell their problems, why I'm mad at you and what you did to me. And the chant in response was, thank you, I'm sorry, I love you, and it's forwards. Anyway, and that was the response. Now, over the centuries and decades, centuries, however long this went on for, Hu Lin picked this up, and he was a student under somebody else as well. And he became the psychologist at the hospital for the criminally insane in Hawaii. And when he joined the staff, and believe me, psychologists apparently stayed there for about 2 months and then would leave, he stayed there for 2 years. And they had about 200 patients. At the end of the 2 years, they closed the hospital. There were only 18 patients left. Everybody else had been discharged back into the community. And now you can sign up for Ho'oponopono all over the world. They've got these chants that you can do on YouTube and all this other stuff. But the fact was that Hulan never actually saw a patient. He would come in the morning and he would take a chart and he'd go into his office and he'd close the door. He would see the patients in the hallway or in the cafeteria, but he never actually sat down in a treatment session with one of these patients. So what went on behind that door, I have never found anybody document. But I go back to the key. I can't believe that he sat in that room without intention, hope, and faith. And that was the key. The entranceway to what he believed and how he did what he did. And if it was what he did and how that worked, which is still speculative, maybe that's how Dave got better too. Now, Joseph Campbell, during his lifetime, was well known for collecting myths, ceremonies of tribes and Aboriginal and Indigenous peoples from around the world. And one of the things he noted was the similarity between these ceremonies and these beliefs and these faiths all around the world, that there was some sort of unity in the spirit. And so this next story, I was hesitant to bring up because the characters in it, in order to tell the story properly, cannot be anonymous. You can, if you wish, be able to identify them. But I thought that it was so compelling what happened that I needed to tell the story. When you look at what Joseph Campbell was telling us about ceremonies. And I've known for many, many years this woman who's gone through her life carrying a basket. And in that basket she would collect pain, she would collect anger, she would collect disappointment. She would hang on to that, hang on. And every so often, the basket would get so heavy that she would take it and she would dump it on the table in a rage, and whoever was in the area would get bombarded with the history that was in that basket. I loved this woman. She's the mother of my 2 sons. And one night, my oldest boy, and they're in their 30s now, phoned me up and he said, "Dad," he said, "I've had this argument with Mom. I was driving her home, and all of a sudden, this basket got dumped." He says, "He went back with stuff that happened 40 years ago, before I was born, and I'm getting all this stuff dumped on me." And he says, "I can't get out of it. I've got another 40 minutes to drive to get her home." And he says, I'm in tears by the end of it. And I could tell he was very upset. I said, "Yeah, okay, I know what you're talking about." And I could see that this was getting in the way of the love of my boys towards their mother. And I didn't believe this was acceptable. Now I have this weird belief, that any problem in life can be solved if you give it enough thought. And if you thought about it and you haven't come up with a solution, you have to think about it some more. The first example I gave you, I've been thinking about for 45 years. So this should be a piece of cake. And I had this vision that what I wanted to do was to have a ceremony. a healing ceremony of meditation where we could bring forward pain, and we'd go through symbols, and we'd go through actions, and we could release the pain, let it go and wash it away. Wow. How can I get there from where I am here, where we've had straining civil conversations for 25 years? How can we bridge this distance? So I began to think about it. I thought what I'm going to do is start with little pieces of hope and light. So I phoned my son up there and had the argument with him. I said, son, I want you to do me a favor. I said, this week, on the Thursday, I want you to phone your mother, and I want you to wish her happy first day of spring. And the topic of this project was spring. He said, I can't do that. He said, I don't want to get into a discussion. But I said, don't get into a discussion. I said, if you get the answering machine, just leave the message. No discussion. Have an exit strategy if she answers the phone. He's in radio, so I said, like, hey, just tell her, I'm on station break, I'm just calling you to say happy first day of spring, I've got to get back on air in 10 seconds, got to go, bye. Okay? And he finally says, yeah, okay. He says, okay. I said, okay, call me when you've done it. So he did. So I thought, well, the next thing I want to do, I want to introduce a little bit more. And I thought every week or 10 days, not so that it would look an obvious pattern, but that we could move things around. So I phoned my other son and I said, you've had some success with your little business you're starting up. And I understand you've got some money in and some checks and you're really inspired about this. I said, I want you to take your mom out to lunch. Will you do that for me? Will you talk to her about the positive things that you're experiencing, the hope, the excitement, the passion you've got about this coming year? And he said, yeah, let's still do that. Okay, great. And we went on, and 10 days later, and her husband had been unwell. He'd been in and out of the hospital a bit. So I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to send some flowers. I want to be very specific message in the flowers. So I go to the florist shop, and I said, I wanted to get some spring flowers. I said, but I need a thing. Oh, spring flowers. We've got number 3, number 11, number 12, you know. Yeah, I'm looking around on the floor, and I said, I want some blue in it. It's got to be blue. Her favorite color is blue. And she said, well, we have this one over here with the iris. I said, okay, listen, can we do something here? It's different. I said, I would like the blue iris, and they can be there, and they can come up out of there, and they're going to be the sky. And I said, on the ground, I said, I'd like to take that yellow stuff or what that green stuff, whatever it is out of there, and put in some baby's breath. Baby's breath will be the melting snow. And those yellow things, can you put a couple of those in, and little beams of sunlight will come through. And the pussy willows branches you got there, those are great. I want those. They're nice and strength, and they give the strength coming up. And I said, over here, I said, I really like these tulips. I said, can you put in those 6 white tulips and make them in a spiral so they go up as a staircase into the sky? They hadn't phoned 911, so I figured that this was okay, we're in the right direction. And he said, and what's the message? And I said, the message is thank you. And I realized, as I said it, that was the first mantra of Ottawa. Put that aside. He said, who's it from? I said, it's anonymous. It just goes. And I paid for it cash. So it couldn't be traced back. Now there's a difference between intention and perception. So the flowers go out and they get delivered. And they do what I intended. They brought a ray of light into her life. And somebody cared. It wasn't just beautiful. Did something else. Every time she walked into that room, she thought, who sent these flowers? Who cared? And she phoned the florist, and of course she couldn't find out who sent the flowers. So she started to call her friends. and saying, well, does this thing happen? Do you know who sent these? Do you know where they came from? And they said, nobody knew. And so this mystery became grow and grow, and it took on a life of its own, because every time she saw them, the reaction got bigger and more intense. So what I thought of as being just a single, isolated event now was becoming this odd thing. And there's another backstory to this too. And it's important to pay attention to, because as I bought these flowers, and I was so specific about it, I'm driving home thinking of the intention of these flowers, these tulips going up the staircase, these tulips up into the sky. And I get home, my wife's unpacking the groceries. She says to me, I did something really silly. I go, you know, like, really? And she says, I was at the grocery store. She says, I was walking through getting the groceries. She said, I went through the flower section. And she says they had this clearance sale at the end of the counter of stuff that was dying, the rest of it. Where they wanted to get it out of there before it completely fell open. And she said, so for $3, she says, I bought this pot, these flowers. I brought them home, and they're on the dining room table. Now look over, and in that pot, 6 white tulips. She had bought those at the exact same time I was at the florist ordering them. So I thought I'm on the right track. So a couple of weeks later, the timing came up again, and I thought, well, I want to send a letter. I'm going to send a letter, I'm going to sign it with my own name, and it's time that I now brought forward my identity, and that I wanted to hope that she would respond by calling me, saying thank you or whatever, and I could invite her out for lunch. When I invite her out for lunch, we could have a discussion about meditation or healing, and we could eventually get to the ceremony that I had in my head, mind. So I wrote this letter, and the theme of the letter was once again spring. It was very short. And I said in it that we cannot change the past, but we can change our understanding and our perception of the past. And in doing that, we change the past. I said, there's one thing I've learned growing up or living on our little farm that we've got, is that each spring we turn the soil over. And each spring, all the chaff in the year before, all the mistakes we made are turned into the soil, and they become the fertilizer and the grounds on which we learn in the coming year and the hope for the crop that comes up. And so I now have figured out which day I want this letter to arrive, and I specifically take it down to the mail post office, the rural post office we've got, and I put it in the mailbox at 3 in the afternoon to make the 4 o'clock pickup. You know, okay, we've got this figured out. I pat the mailbox on the top of its head to wish it all good luck. Get back in my car. What I didn't realize was that that letter was not going to be read for another month. Boy, you'd think that would throw a wrench into the plans. So I drive home, and I pull in the driveway, and I get out and I pick up my own mail. There's little flags up, and I get out. And I go through the mail, and in it there's a letter from a lawyer. And it's stamped confidential. And it's addressed to her. I hadn't received a letter in my mailbox addressed to her for 25 years. And at the same time I am putting this letter in the slot of the post office, the postman is putting this letter in my mailbox. Now I knew what it said because I got one too. And the legal firm was closing down, and they had personal papers that we had made out years ago, and they wanted to know what to do with them and dispose of them. It got to do with your wills and your powers of attorney and stuff. And I said, you know, if you need to update your power of attorney since it's been so long, here are some suggestions and things to do in your will, and we'd be glad to direct you to proper sources. Okay, well, I knew I had my lunch meeting. So when the day arrived that I was expecting her phone call and didn't come, I phoned her and I said, oh, I have this letter. It's marked confidential. It's here, and I don't trust the post office to send it to you, so do you want to meet for lunch and I can give it to you? She said, okay, fine. That lunch meeting was just under 5 hours. And during that meeting we talked, and yes, she did do meditation. She did do yoga. Her spirituality was still there. But something else happened. I realized in myself I could not go there. I couldn't do it. I was not the person to do this. The connection to do this ceremony, it wasn't going to happen with me. And so we left the lunch meeting, and I had no solution. I was now at a dead end, and I started to think again. Dangerous stuff. And I thought, my son, my youngest son, he studied anthropology in school, in the university. He took courses in ceremonies. He actually did a paper, an A+ paper on the Japanese tea ceremony. He went and experienced this, and he learned all about the symbols of each motion in this ceremony. It was hundreds of years old, and the significance of each of these steps. I said, he can do it. Not only that, but it gives a father a chance to teach his son what's important. It allows me an opportunity to pass this on. So I phoned him, he said, yeah, I think I can do that. So we met, and I said, well, one of the important things we have to do is, first of all, is decide where we're going to do this. I said, so think about where we're going to do this, and I'll get back to you. We got back a couple of days later, and we had both come up within 50 feet of the same place where this was going to take place. And it was about an hour's drive out of Ottawa. And what it was the bottom of a waterfall in a stream. It was overlooked by the property where she grew up, where she had learned to swim, where she bathed, where she played in the waterfall. So we went out there, and we were able to find a promontory that went out into the river, at the base of the falls. And it was springtime, and the water's pouring over this waterfall, and the mist is coming up, and the sun's coming through the mist, and you're getting the lighting and the rainbow, and it's coming, mist is coming over us as we're standing there, and the roar of the water. This is the place. This is where we can get healed. Back where she was a child, where she had her joy. She learned to swim. Okay. So the next thing we had to figure out was we wanted her to come with an open heart. Not being defensive, not being she was being challenged, not being she was being, there was no threat involved. We wanted this to be a joyful occasion. Ooh, this is going to be a challenge. But that 10th day in the pattern was Mother's Day. I said, this could be a Mother's Day present. You don't have to tell her what you're going to do. You're just going to go and have a special time with her together. And this will be the special time. On this promontory, opposite where she grew up, by the waterfall with the mist and everything, and you're going to have a special time. And she will come. We know this. Not only that, Mother's Day was something else to this. It's the day her own mother died. That was the portal to the pain. Here you are on the anniversary, in this space, all this environment, this power, and there is the opportunity to start to release the pain. And we talked about symbols. I said, do you want music? How are we going to integrate music into this ceremony and choreograph the dance? Is it going to be a drum? Is it going to be loud? Is it going to be chimes? Are we going to just let it be the wind or the water, the sound of the water? You decide. This is going to be your ceremony. You choose and you work in. You can use different themes as they come in and out of your different pictures and images you're creating. And what about a flame? Fire, it can warm, it can enlighten, it can consume. What role is fire going to play in the dance? And are you going to wash, heal, and where's the water going to come from, and how are you going to present it, and where in the ceremony is this going to go? And I realized he understood when he asked and stated, I don't know why, but I feel I'd like to put a plant and give her a plant at the end of the ceremony, that we can go back and we can plant it in a garden, and that would conclude the ceremony. Yes, you do understand. Because as you wash things away, you have to put something stronger in its place. Otherwise, with the next tide, the pain will come back. And so we set all this up, and I dropped him off to pick up his mother and go to this place, and I said, I'll go ahead, and I will set up on the promontory. I'll get everything that we decided and everything we've planned, and I'll make sure it's in positions where you can access it, and you can do this dance, and you can do this ceremony, and things will flow together. And he did. And she came, and I was about a quarter and half a mile away. I just wanted to make sure that nobody interfered, that I could move in if somebody was walking their dog or something or other. And it went on for an hour and a half. The tears flowed, and the emotion tore out of both of them. And at the end, they pick up the plant, they take it back to the garden, they plant it in the garden where she can nurture it, she can look after it. The pain has been moved away, and she now can nurture the plant with the hope for the future and not hold on to the pain. And as I drove him home, he just took a deep sigh and he said, I never expected this. And we were quiet for the rest of the drive home. I talked to him a couple of days later, and he told me how difficult it was to recover. Just bent his mind as much as it had anybody else's. I said, that's okay. That's what it's supposed to do. And you think, wow, you know, we've done it. We've done the journey. No. We'd only arrived at the threshold of the first step. 9 days after that ceremony on my schedule, her husband unexpectedly died. And you look back and you realize the tulips with the stairway up into the sky. The tulips on our dining room table have been brought home to die. All the friends she had phoned to make contact with old friends and bring them back into her life. You had the lawyers advising her to update her will. You had a new bond with your son, where he is now taking care and taking on you and relieving the pain. The pain that was washed away to make room for the mourning that was about to take place. This dance took place on a promontory in the middle of a river, base of a waterfall, in 2019. It just as easily could have been by the light of a flame on the floor of a cave 10,000 years ago. It's the same thing. It's in the manual. You just have to feel the manual. It doesn't matter whether it's a wife holding the body, her dead husband, or a young man hearing the voice of his mother telling him her name. Thank you. break, yes,
Yes.
and we'll do the second feast.
No questions?
If you have a question, my question is, what the heck was this? What are we talking about?
The question that I have, because I believe in that kind of spontaneity, so how would you advise somebody to take that challenge to keep courage? If you don't have that courage, it does take courage, doesn't it? Like to believe that you can really make that happen, and just knowing that you can is scary. You know what I mean? And so how would you,
Darn right.
what kind of advice would you give somebody? I don't know what makes it frightening. You know, maybe it's just habit to just sit back and go with whatever.
Well, you're letting your brain rule, and it's not, it's like the argument, your car versus the broken heart. You can't convince somebody with any logical argument to take that step. That step is not the logical
Yeah,
step.
that's true.
They have to find that within themselves and do that. And once they've done it, they know, you know that's the right step. And think of all the opportunities where you've had the hope, faith, and the intention, but you've not had the courage. The opportunities that have gone by of things that might have been, but weren't. I don't know how you explain that, because I think we've all had those intentions and those hopes and those.
How would you, what kind of advice would you give somebody who is feeling a little queasy about keep having those and making it happen?
Spend time with themselves and convince themselves what they're seeing and doing is correct. And that it's worth the gamble. What are you going to lose? What's to lose?
It's
There's
the
nothing.
opportunities.
You can lose the opportunity, but if you turn the key and you try and walk through that door, and what are you afraid of? That it won't work?
No, that
Who's going to know that it, well, you're afraid that it will work?
Yes. That's
Yes.
what I'm trying to describe.
Yeah.
Because it's powerful.
And then what?
And it's, there's,
Wouldn't, I mean, the thing is that such a weird, I understand, what, I mean, I know exactly what you're saying, because I think that happens each time you're faced with having to turn the key and walk through the door. What I find, though, is that having done it a couple of times, is that it reaffirms itself, and the experience, that absolute exhaustion of, holy smokes, what happened? That question that I had for 45 years, how did this happen? How did we get here? That miracle of basic human nature that we forget and put behind us because our logic says don't. Albert was just ahead of you. Okay.
Just going to say that for me, those experiences that you've told about, it's like proof that there is a creator, and that there's always help forthcoming if we can ask for it, or do actions that direct us in that way. Just want to say too that my grandmother on my grandfather's side, the ability to find things. Sometimes even when people would drown, they would get out in a canoe, or something with a canoe, and she'd just look over the edge and she'd see the bottom is here, and the body wouldn't be there. Or she would find things like people had lost. She died a long time ago, and some years, many years after she had passed away, a friend of mine had lost a ring in that little park there on Coburg Street, and my friend had sent her in the area where she lost a ring. Didn't think she would find it again, and I went to the park, picked up the ring, and brought it to her. But that was because I communicated with my grandmother right from the time that I set up my home to go to the park to get the ring. I asked my grandmother to find it, so it wasn't me that found it. It was my grandmother. So I didn't have to look for it; it was there.
So I've been interested in becoming more self-aware and trying to figure out where I fit into the world. But what I see, like there's a collective aspect to this, which it seems like a lot of the way we look at the world, it's individualistic, but like we're on a big project, all of us together, right? And I'm just wondering, like, how do we get to the place where our story is sort of interlinked to do something right for all of us?
Well, now you're talking about global movements. And I mean, that's, wow.
Well, I think the time is right.
Think about it tonight, let me know tomorrow, okay? All I can say is that we know that that manual was written, that we have within us thousands of years, and hundreds of thousands of years ago maybe, when we, way back, when we relied on it so much more to get us through life than we do now in our brain. And I don't know how you convince somebody else to go there. I'm not even sure that I can always convince myself to go there. It is a courageous step, but it's an individual journey. Life is an individual journey. Yeah. You had a question?
It's maybe an observation.
Yeah.
No, I was just thinking as I listened to Albert speak and other people talking, is that, but you kind of answered it by saying it's our own individual journey and belief systems and shapes and understanding, and yet truth is when I always see truth as the bottom of once you've sort of iterated something, what's left over is truth, and it really comes down to those simple parts. In Albert's case, it would be creator. For others, it will be other words. But I think it goes back to that notion. And you're thinking of more of it as an activist thing, perhaps. But I think part of it is, yeah, it is that collective consciousness where we all come from.
Yeah. It's the void. You know, when I'm lying there with Dave, it was the void. It was like, it's not in reality. It's not this curtain of reality that we rely on and we look and we see mirrors all around us that reflect back reality. Yeah, it's beyond that. And it's when that no longer satisfies you that it tears and you've got to reach through and you've got to find something else to do. Mr. Hunt, you had a question.
Oh, I'm just thinking, I mean, I don't know if, when you were talking about the void and the key, right, I just listening to the people, I mean, and the questions, I mean, when you're opening a door that you don't know what's behind it, it's always a scary act, right? But it's like when you're talking about the void, I kept thinking about, okay, well the key is going in the keyhole, which is the void, right? And so for the key to work, it needs the void, and that nothingness is a scary thing because you never know what's going to come out and something might not, you know? But
the journey that ends up in the woman's husband dying. I didn't think that was it. All I was trying to do was try and release some of this pain. And now we go to the next step, and the next step after this, which is going to carry us into some sort of a constructive relationship. That wasn't my original intention at all. But that's the journey. That's where I need my wife to, participate. But yes, you have.
Well, what you're talking about is my philosophy, is that's what I call the in-between. And it's soul-to-soul connection, higher consciousness, higher energy. And until we believe we can trust in ourselves and that we're okay and that we can carry forward, it's just pass through that fear to the unknown. And it's taken me a long time to understand that I don't need to know the reason why. I don't need to know, as long as it resonates with me, it feels good with me, and there's just, I don't need to know why, but at one time I needed to know why for everything. And now it's just like, and that's just, I find that in between is where we find peace.
The journey of bringing the pieces of light, of objects into the life, and this that led up to this ceremony. I mean, the synchronicity was firing off. I mean, I've just discussed a couple of things, but I mean, it was like everywhere you turn, you were getting this connections, faith, hope, intention, colliding with your reality on your day-to-day.
I find it all the time, every single day I live in symbolism now. It's just signs and symbolism, I'm just so grateful for it. It's just a matter of being open and aware to it, and being grateful, and the last, part of that prayer is forgiveness, that you, and it's really important, right? Gratitude, forgiveness, and love, trust. And so, yeah, so, but it was, your story was absolutely beautiful, and your empathy and your, it's such a heartfelt thing, so thank you.
Glad you were here. Everybody ready for more coffee and just a couple of sandwiches, and then Delva will get set up in the meantime, get Delva set up with a projector. And